let's go ahead and talk about that exercise then. Of course, all of these questions that I ask is with the understanding that there are no generalizations. Okay, it's a very, very important caveat to throw out there, but we can, for the most part or in large, I'm sure there are exercises that are more safe than others to do as you're recovering or when you're in recovery. Can we talk about that? What exercises would you recommend?
Okay, so again, I love that you said that there are no absolutes, and that's exactly that is very much how it is. So the way that I like to think of it is, instead of what exercises can I do, it's why do I want to do this exercise and how, and knowing what you're looking for, those 4 P's that we talked about, will help you to decide whether or not an exercise is appropriate for you. So that said, when you're in those early postpartum phases, it's very important to take that time to restore that core and pelvic floor connection. Really important to take that time to heal and strengthen. So those exercises and this is again where the physio will come into play, because it's very important to know that you're doing them properly. But you'll get a lot of questions probably about Kegels and whether they're appropriate. And so there is a layer of that in there, but really understanding how to properly do something like a Kegel, which is much more than what the general public thinks that it is. How to control restoring that function and control of your core and pelvic floor is sort of that first base. So and those exercises are going to be very different for every woman, but a lot of them in that really early phase, and a lot of people are waiting for sort of that 6-week go ahead, and I do advocate for getting that. But there's a lot that you can do that it sounds quite boring, but it's a lot of breathing. It's a lot of breathing on the floor and using your breath to reconnect your core and pelvic floor, and that's sort of that foundation stage. So then when we talk about how to progress those exercises, so then it gets a little stickier. And I want to qualify this with saying as well that even though someone could be, sort of like we talked about with diastasis earlier, there's no black and whites, because we could have someone at 2 months postpartum who's, able to do some of the above, the exercises I'm going to talk about. And we might have someone that's 2 years and not be able to do them because once you're postpartum, you're always postpartum, and there's always symptoms that can come and go. And if you've never taken the time to address any of these symptoms, they might still be there. So when we're talking about later postpartum, that's sort of what I mean by that. So some of the exercises that tend to cause people a bit of a sticking point are things that involve a plank position. So even things like a push-up where you are in that plank, that requires a lot of core strength that generally most women have to build up to. We can't just start doing those things. Mm-hmm. So that's one of them. A lot of times it will be, especially for diastasis, twisting rotational movements. And so learning how to do that in a way that feels supportive to you and is using your core, and helping your core to function is really important, especially when you can imagine on a practical level, how many times a mom is rotating to pick up her kid. Yeah. So that's one of them. A lot of times, jumping right back into very heavy lifting is not always appropriate. Again, building up to it. High impact exercises are another one where a lot of women will feel very symptomatic. And so it needs to be addressed. Okay, let's not just bring out the skipping rope and a pad. Mm-hmm. Let's slow down and think about how we could do this in a way that's going to build up that strength so that you can skip all out and not be leaking. So things like box jumps, anything that with that high impact if we're talking about more of the boot camp for mom stuff, sure. Jumping jacks are another one, things like that. So anything that involves that high impact, which also is running as well. So running, jumping on a trampoline, which maybe for some isn't necessarily thought of as exercise, but as you know, exercise and our lives are very much intertwined.
100%.
Yeah. So those kind of things. So those are some of the ones to really watch for. And then a lot of the traditional core exercises are just not appropriate, mm-hmm. and which is why I would like to say that no matter how badly we want to, and for some women, and I was one of them, so I completely empathize and understand, you can't out-train postpartum. You could lie on a floor and do 100 crunches every day, and if those crunches aren't appropriate for your body and where you're at and you didn't build up to that crunch, it's not doing you any favors. So taking the time to just allow yourself to embrace postpartum and lay that foundation first in those early stages, or whenever it is you're taking the time to address these things, is always going to be the key to success, is to lay the foundation and then progress from there.